Hello, friends. Welcome back to No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fisher. I am the senior NBA reporter at Yahoo Sports, and I'm joined by my man, your man, everyone's man, senior NBA writer at Yahoo Sports, Dan Devine. What is up?
Jake, I feel woefully underdressed to be with you today, given the other folks that you spent time with earlier this week. I feel like I should have had a bespoke, seersucker suit ready for you, some kind of fun accoutrement up here, but you're just getting me in a black t-shirt today. Sorry about that.
Dan is referring to my Monday evening in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Scenic Secaucus.
In the back corner of an entertainment parking lot where I spent an evening with Monty McCutcheon wearing one of his 40 bow ties that apparently he hand makes and sews himself.
Incredible.
And I also was a little bit disappointed, I'm not going to lie. He's wearing a phenomenal outfit when I did go, but then the next night, Tuesday night, he was wearing this like forest green vest thing the guy has style. We'll get into all that later. But first, we're recording this as always on Thursday. My company computer is saying it's Tuesday, April 18th. It is not. It is Thursday, May 4th. And last night, Joel Embiid, the now reigning MVP of the NBA, all the discussions, all the discourse, all the personal attacks, they're over. He's the MVP. He came back last night. But the Sixers, after winning game one without him while I was at the replay center, they did not look good at all last night, Dan. I'm just going to leave it there. What is your immediate reaction after Philadelphia got blown the hell out of the Boston Harbor? TD Garden was kind of going bonkers with every Malcolm Brogdon three-pointer. It was not, Joe Mazzulla, a coaching friend, sent me a quick video, a quip of him at the end of his press conference saying, what? No asks about adjustments. What adjustments did you see out there?
I think the big one is make 23s. That's usually a pretty good adjustment to go game to game, right? Getting up 51, though, was kind of the key there. And that goes back to your point about Embiid coming back and not looking like his MVP self. I think Doc Rivers put a lot of it on, the Sixers offense not operating quite right. And if they weren't getting good looks or they were turning the ball over too much. And then that gets Boston in transition. If you're scrambling, you're giving up open shots. And that's part of it. And that's also part of getting Joel back after Philly had been so successful in game one, spreading the floor out, letting Harden operate with the kind of space he hasn't had in quite a while, and definitely never with Joel. Figuring out how to reintegrate him, it was a little bit clunky. It didn't quite look as smooth and as comfortable as it has all season. That said, the bigger thing to me was on the defensive end, where it's almost like getting Joel back made the Sixers perimeter defenders think like, okay, well, we don't got to worry about this. Like, he'll clean it all up in the back. He had 5 blocks in the first half, but you can't get blown by every time and then not give up open shots. There's going to be a rotation. There's going to be a kick out. You're going to have open shots. And I looked at this up afterwards because I'm looking, as I was watching it, I'm thinking there's a lot of wide open shots in this game. According to Second Spectrum, 32 of Boston's 51 threes were either lightly contested or completely uncontested. So if like 60% of your 3-point shots are coming with nobody within 6 or 8 feet of you, and you have a team full of pretty good shooters, you're going to make a lot of them. And if the Sixers can't defend the ball better and contain the ball better, they can't rely on 70%-ish of Embiid to cover up everything. So some of this is just the home team down 0-1 is going to come out like a house of fire. Some of it is a team that is generally an excellent offensive team is going to wind up finding its level from 3-point range. Some of it, though, is like there's stuff that Philly has to get fully comfortable with both versions of their team kind of coming together. The good news is they got what they went to Boston for. Now they got to avoid giving it right back once the scene changes to Philadelphia.
So with New York and Miami, their schedule was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Game 1 was Sunday. You and I are both there. Game 2 was Tuesday at MSG. Game 3 ain't till Saturday. Right. So definitely made a ton of sense after the Heat took game 1 on the road at MSG. Jimmy Butler sprained ankle to kind of save him for 5 days until game 3. It was much shorter of a turnaround with Philadelphia, being that their series didn't start until Monday night, right before game 2 of Denver. So that's why there was only one game last night. and there's one game tonight with Warriors-Lakers, trying to even out the schedule to get these two series back onto the same day and try to get the programming all aligned. So less of a turnaround. I mean, Philly and Boston get back at it on Friday, so I understand like saving Embiid one more day or 2 more days might not necessarily have provided much benefit for an injury that he said last night is something that usually would take a 4 to 6 week recovery period. Still a little surprised that they played him in game 2 after taking game 1, though. I mean, that was something that, I talked to someone with the team before Monday night's opener, and they were definitely optimistic and like kind of speaking as if it was written in stone that he was going to start on game 2. But after they won, I thought to myself, man, that's a lot of leeway to give the big fella and his knee just a little bit extra rest, a little bit of recovery before going back in front of the home fans. But there is, the rest versus rust type of discussion as well. So, I mean, you're obviously not a doctor, but I'm curious, did you have any thought, any reaction to that rest versus rust type of idea? Because he hadn't played in 14 days. The broadcast made it very clear to repeat that fact over and over again last night. Right. And to kind of reinsert him and the fact that Philly is such a different team with him on the floor as opposed to without. And not just when he's active, when he's on the bench. Like, that's been the story of the Sixers postseason basically for the last 4 years, dating back to 2019, even in that Toronto series when they had Jimmy Butler and that amazing starting 5. It was still such a stark contrast for when he was on the floor and when he wasn't. So just to get him back out there, I'm sure is a massive benefit to get him in the flow of things. But I don't know. It was interesting to me that gamesmanship wasn't exactly there.
Yeah, I think that my main thought on the rest versus rust thing is that clearly the Sixers thought it was important to knock the rust off. And you had both Doc and Embiid talk about it after the game. Doc Rivers, quote, "We knew there were going to have to be some kind of growing pains bringing him back, and that's why we got it out of the way today." Embiid, quote, "I just felt like it probably would have been the same result as far as how I'm feeling for game 3, probably rusty and not myself, but I just feel like I just got this out of the way today. Disappointed by the loss, but it's a step toward getting back to myself." So for there's a component of no NBA action for 2 weeks and then like re-entering the heat of a playoff series doing it. If you do that at home when you're already, it's 1-1 and you have to like fear the worst about, are you losing home court advantage? That environment might be a little bit hectic to have a dud in, right? Maybe, you can flush it, get it out of the way, a couple more days of rest and recovery, but seeing how it responds to actual game action winds up being a net positive. And also giving the Doc and the staff and the rest of the players that much extra of like, this is what we looked like in game 1. This is what we look like in game 2. How do we kind of blend the best versions of ourselves and try to get Harden back to the level or closer to the level he was operating in game 1? Or if nothing else, get us back to the level we were during the regular season when this was the best 2-man game in the league. We were the best shooting team in the league and we had, a top 3 offense. So I think the idea of we kind of knew there was always going to be Boston was maybe going to win that game 95 times out of 100 no matter what, because those, the home team down 0-1 is going to come back with a furious punch. So like use that as the opportunity to kind of knock the rust off and get us back into rhythm. I think the big concern would be if Embiid winds up, swelling a bunch today, if the intervening 2 days don't respond, his knee doesn't respond as well to the activity, then yeah, you might wind up coming to regret that decision to get him back on the floor early. But they clearly saw value in get him back on the floor kind of as soon as he's ready and able and be able to figure out how to play out of that. And now we see what the results of that are in game 3.
So we talked about this well before the playoffs started, that you and I were both as objective observers and fans of the NBA at large. We did not want Joel Embiid to sustain another injury throughout this postseason, as he does.
It's a real hot take to be like, I hope this guy doesn't get hurt.
But I'm saying this right now. If Joel Embiid is listening, which he's not, but if he is.
You have little faith. Come on.
Joel and I have a little bit of a relationship. I've spent some time in Philadelphia. He knows. We've chatted. We have a little bit of a rapport. Just want to tell the big guy, stop flopping, man. Not in a tactical way, in a health way, because look, the Sixers coaches that were there under Brett Brown were amazed at how this kind of fledgling phenom who had just picked up a basketball only a couple of years before was so quick to point out things in film study of how to manipulate the referees, how to engage contact and get to the foul line in ways that we typically see from scoring guards like Kobe Bryant, etc. So I get it. It's a very, very rare talent. It is a massive reason why he is a leading scorer of the NBA. But when you're nursing these type of injuries, man, we don't want to see you flailing onto the hardwood parquet out at half court when Grant Williams isn't even touching you, man. That's my plea. I know Sixers fans everywhere collectively gasp every time he hits the deck. And like, now that he is injured, like, it's not a thing of like, will he get injured from falling? Like, it's just amazing. Maybe this isn't even a plea. Maybe it's just to take an observation of like, it is so amazing how even when he's battling something to this degree, it's so ingrained in him to figure out ways to spark a whistle. It's honestly remarkable. Like, the guy is fully wired mechanically in his brain to manipulate a whistle. It is something that I have never seen before. Someone that large who is actively hurt. It is insane to me.
Sure, but listen, you want each guy to be able to get to his game, right? We're talking about the players who are most successful in the postseason are the ones who can not just buckle under the moment and carry over what they do. This is part of what Joel Embiid does, to the point where like there have been feature stories written about him learning how to fall, right? Like that it's less about how frequently he does go to the ground, but does he go to the ground the right way, like a pro wrestler learning how to take a bump or something like that, right? Like, this is part of his story, part of his the approach that he has, and also what makes him one of the, as you said, one of the most sort of special scorers there is. Whether or not the refs are going to reward it, whether or not it winds up being more of a danger to himself and to others, we'll see. I mean, pancake Marcus Smart last night, although, as Kevin Harlan said on the broadcast, where was he supposed to fall? If Marcus Smart is directly underneath him, what are you supposed to do about that? TBD on how much of a danger to himself and others he winds up being. But I think the big thing is he got through game 2 without, even with those extra pratfalls, without any additional injury sustained, at least it seemed that way. So the hope is you build on that, more minutes, more of an opportunity for him to get into rhythm, and maybe he looks a little bit more like the MVP in game 3 than he did in his brief appearance in game 2.
So Embiid is back. We will see if Jimmy Butler comes back on Saturday for game 3 in Miami against the New York Knicks. I have no updated information from my contacts around the Miami Heat, but I will say, after Eric Spoelstra said following game 1 that Jimmy stayed in the game because he wanted to, I fully believe that Jimmy Butler, if he wants to play in game 3 and feels up to it, he will be out there. So I am working under the assumption we will see arguably the best player from this postseason so far back on the floor. How healthy will he be? We don't know. I mean, Spo has kind of been like flippantly pushing back on any question wanting to know, even though it's like a very important question to know the answer to, because it's fickle, ankle injuries, who knows, swelling, this and that. Like, every day is its own odyssey, blah, blah, blah. We get it. But I think the other interesting thing is that I don't know how necessarily, like if he's got a loose wheel, I don't think it's going to dramatically change his impact on the series, because to me, and what I have always been struck by, what makes Jimmy Butler so effective in the playoffs, he's not really like a shake and bake, razzle dazzle, sizzle dribble guy. He just is going in a straight line at the rim, and he's going to head fake and pivot and figure out a way to either get fouled or loft a shot over you. And he also, I think, recognizes just as well as any superstar, like, there are 4 other guys on the court that I also need to like uplift and maximize here. No moment more famous than his Minnesota practice deluge, where he only took one shot while dismantling the entire Timberwolves roster and trying to request a trade out of Minnesota. So all that being said, I'm kind of like curious from a intrigue standpoint of like what we're going to see out of him. How is he going to try to exert his influence and will on this game without necessarily being at 100%? Because when Julius Randle comes back from an ankle injury, it's still Julius Randle just doing Julius Randle things. I just have a hunch, I have a hankering that we're going to see maybe just like a different flavor of Jimmy Butler out there come Saturday. What say you?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, to your point, the discussion of how healthy is he going to be. Here's what Eric Spoelstra said before game 2. None of us know, come on, this is not rocket science. He also said we probably just ran out of time today. So in terms of, the treatment that he was getting, was he going to be able to go in time for the announcement? They had to declare his status. Wound up being no, but Spoelstra in that indication was like, if it was the game was a couple hours later, who knows, maybe. And then after the game, he said, quote, his body will let you know, him know, me know, the team know. There's no way to predict it, but I'm glad we have a couple extra days. Tom Thibodeau, for his part, was like, I think it was Nick Friedel of ESPN asked, are you expecting him to play on Saturday? And he said, you already know the answer to that question. Like, of course, Tibbs is going to prepare. Well, Tibbs is going to prepare for every eventuality. He's like Batman trying to figure out his dossiers on how to take down the other members of the Justice League. But he will be prepared for if Jimmy plays and if he doesn't. In terms of the how effective he can be or what kind of role he'll operate under, I think that's it's interesting to see how successful Miami was in game 2 without him. I guess sort of somewhat analogous to Philly in game 1 without Embiid, where they were like, well, our best way to operate here is to spread you out, try to bomb as many threes as possible, change our defensive strategy. In Philly, that was going from drop to switching. For Miami, it was leaning super heavy on the zone. But we have these sort of other ways that we need to play. When Jimmy's on the floor, they don't play that way. They're going to play a little bit more one-on-one. They're going to play more with him in pick and roll, him in dribble handoff. But if he's not as able to operate that way, you wonder if they do decide to go a little bit more in that spread, more Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry handling the ball, a little bit more bombs away approach. And then on the defensive end, would zone protect a sort of bulky ankle a little bit more, as opposed to asking him to guard Jalen Brunson through actions over and over again? Would the Knicks, who didn't attack him that way at the end of game 1, would the Knicks even want to try to put him in action and go at him, because that's the level of respect that they have for him as a disruptor, his hands on the ball, all that kind of stuff? I'm not exactly sure, but I do know, while I think you can say there's not going to be 100% of Jimmy Butler on the floor whenever he does come back, you don't have to be 100% to make a big impact. You mentioned Julius Randle. He's pretty clearly not 100% right now. Asked after the game how the rehab process was, he said it was hell. And asked after the game how he's feeling, he said it doesn't even matter right now. And he still got out there, and I think it was 37, 38 minutes, 25, 12, and 8, hugely impactful in the minutes that he had, even if he wasn't moving quite as well laterally on the defensive end or didn't necessarily have the same level of wind later in the game. Jimmy can give you more like that. Jimmy can be in that kind of conversation for how he can find a way to make an impact, even if he's not his best self. And if he's able to do that, 2 times in Miami, then, where the Knicks are coming home in a very difficult place.
There's been a lot of talk both online and around the league about like, should the Knicks be worried? They barely beat Miami without Jimmy Butler. I mean, that was the thought with Boston before Joel Embiid came back. So a little bit of proof in the pudding there. Also, like, I think every game is just a different game in these series. They're all just different chess matches with different pieces on the board. You've got different players available. You've got different players in foul trouble, different health situations, whatever. And the other thing I'm curious by, so much of Madison Square Garden is made out to be a home court advantage. And I do wonder if it can be the opposite. Because I remember years ago talking to a Pelicans coach who was saying, when they were in New York, then this coach was saying to me, man, like the Garden tonight, like we're ready. When people come to us, they're not like hyped to play at Smoothie King Center. And,
no shade to the Smoothie King Center, the fine people at of New Orleans.
I love New Orleans. I One of my favorite city, honestly, outside of New York and the continental U.S., New Orleans is my favorite city and the city I would choose to live in outside of here. It doesn't make any sense because they're vastly different, but of all my travels, New Orleans is the place I felt the most home. That being said, there's like this extra stage that, I mean, when Jimmy was warming up before game one, there was like an NBA social camera guy like filming his warm up and like talking about it. And Jimmy was kind of doing like a whole like Madison Square Garden, like we're here at Madison Square Garden. He's flipping off the crowd in game two and clapping at the fans. Like, I do wonder if there's like a pressure added to that to perform in front of that raucous crowd from the home team that maybe, and this is me just speaking from, you know, a vibesman perspective. I just wonder if maybe the traditional like, rotation players typically, or secondary, supporting cast shooters, they typically shoot better at home versus on the road, familiar setting, blah blah blah. Like, I just kind of wonder if changing things up and going to Miami might actually benefit New York. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't have the answer. I'm just presenting an idea to you.
I'll say two things about that. One is the Knicks this season were 23-18 at home and 24-17 on the road. So there might be something to, or at least the way that they performed might be something to that. And the other thing was being there for game two, there was definitely some anxiety in the building, right? And especially as the threes kept going down for Miami and the game's getting a little bit later and it's into the second half. And wait a second, why are we not pulling away from this team doesn't have its best player, also doesn't have Tyler Hero, also doesn't have Victor Oladipo? Like, why are we, how could it be possible that Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin and Max Strus are, beating us like a drum here? And so there was a moment, maybe sort of mid third quarter or so, where I'm saying like, it feels like there's like, it's that point where anxiety and excitement are kind of the flip sides of the same coin. Like, the emotional charge of it is there. It just needs something to tilt it one way or the other. And it's like the building is ready to blow up if the Knicks do something to make it happen. Jalen Brunson getting going, hitting a couple of threes in a row, tilted it that way. Later in the fourth quarter, the big Isaiah Hartenstein offensive rebounds, the Josh Hart follow shots, finally hitting a couple of corner threes. All of that made a big impact. But you're right. Like, there's a moment where you feel the heaviness of 20,000 completely riled up New Yorkers.
Drunk. That's the word you're looking for. Drunk.
I mean, there's a couple of, where you are in the press box, there's a couple people up above, the row above us that were pretty leather-lunged and pretty lubricated. Yeah, I think actually one dude spilled a beer on Yaron Weitzman, but there's a lot of, shouts out to Yaron. It can get hectic in there. And when that's going your way, when the Knicks are making shots, when they're getting stops, transition, Josh Hart going coast to coast, it can feel like, an avalanche on top of a visiting team. But I think you're right that like sometimes that can also feel a little bit like a claustrophobia for the home team when it's not going well. We'll see if that winds up shaking their way in Miami. But I think the biggest thing is just the Knicks. You saw the limitations of the Knicks roster in game one when it was basically just Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett to initiate stuff. And now Randall's back. We'll see how effective he is after a few more days of rest. Hopefully that ankle holds up for him and for Jalen Brunson as well. And the big hope for the sort of quiet, sneaky hope for the Knicks is Manuel Quickley's been basically lost this entire postseason. He has not performed nearly to the level that he was when he was Sixth Man of the Year finalist and I think our picks for Sixth Man of the Year. But he got going a little bit in the second half of game two, and Tibbs noted it after the game, was like he's got the green light. We trust him to get it going. He got a couple of buckets tonight that helped us out. Interested to see if he can build on that, because they desperately need more initiators, because Miami is going to pack the paint, force you to spray, force you to make shots. The Knicks need more of those guys to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
There you go. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then talk about the Western Conference playoff picture. Welcome back to No Cap Room, where the Los Angeles Lakers, who I have hated on since the play-in tournament, are making me look a little stupid. But I'm still not really believing in the Lakers. They took game one. It's great. I'm blaming the terrible jersey combination which has been a take of mine for a long time, that it seems to kind of have reached the mainstream now, that we've seen too many jerseys, and like it's LeBron, it's Steph, it's Lakers, Warriors, and then we get these weird black and gold that's look like, I forget what these jerseys are called. They're supposed to be some type of, homage to the city or the franchise, whatever. But to me, they've always looked like a bad AAU team jersey that's supposed to look cool. And I'm blaming that. It's bad juju. It's just, bring out the We Believe jerseys before these other uniforms that have no real significance to this last era of basketball. And I'm, for a whole nother podcast, I'm even more worried when I heard Adam Silver say that there's going to be more new jerseys for the in-season tournament that they're coming up with. But that's, again, a whole nother conversation for a different day. You could put up an alarm bell about Golden State dropping game one. You could say that maybe it was just, a short turnaround from an emotional game 7 on the road. The Lakers definitely have rounded into a legitimate playoff threat. I will give them that.
How kind of you. They're up 1-0 in the second round on the defending champs. They're 5-2 in the playoffs, and you're like, I'll give them this much. They're not bad.
I'm going to say this. To me, it really just comes down to, can Anthony Davis keep doing this? That I don't know if that's oversimplifying it, but back to his Pelicans days, I alluded to a conversation with a New Orleans coach earlier in this show. Like, Pelican staffers were frustrated in his heyday there for the inconsistencies, the tendency to no-show after gigantic performances. And we saw a little bit of that in Memphis, right? I don't have the game log in front of me, but he was super, super dominant, and then he was just kind of like another starter on the court. And after a series where Kevon Looney just kind of ate Domantas Sabonis' lunch on the glass all series long, Anthony Davis made Kevon Looney look like a run-of-the-mill center who makes less than $10 million a year. Pretty incredible feat, I think, after the energy and momentum he was riding into that series. And is there more to the Lakers' chances here at dethroning Golden State than that? Because he is kind of the big, like, kryptonite to Golden State's strategy all along. They have always kind of shied away from, pretty much since Andrew Bogut exited stage left, they have always kind of shied away. Kevon Looney's contract shows exactly how much they feel they need to financially value the front court in this era where Draymond Green has been able to hold down the fort as a small ball 5 whenever things get tough. Does this series really just come down to Anthony Davis's ability to do AD things?
I think so. And the standout number to me right now is where LA sits defensively in the playoffs, and that's number 1. They have been the best defense in the postseason. They turned Memphis's water off, and you can say that's not particularly difficult given that Memphis barely had any shooting, and then Luke Kennard, and when they finally found something there, he gets injured. Dylan Brooks is shooting the way Dylan Brooks shoots, and then it kind of created it made it an easier problem to solve. But the way Anthony Davis in game 1 in particular was able to just completely shut off the rim, put the Warriors in a position where so much of their offense had to be generated from beyond the arc. And to the point where they went 21 for 53 from 3-point range and lost because they only made 22 2-point baskets. They only shot 6 free throws. He just turned the entire interior into a no-fly zone. And if he's going to be able to do that and do stuff like on that last Steph drive, get out and block his floater and, just wreak havoc in terms of what kind of shots the Warriors can get and whether they're able to get second chance opportunities or not, all that kind of stuff. It just changes fundamentally what an offense is able to do. And that's the recipe, right? That's what the whole plan was. Anthony Davis becomes our best player. LeBron no longer has to be every night. We have an elite defense. We have enough sort of complementary playmaking and shooting and, wing defenders around it. We get enough points in the half court. We run like bats out of hell in transition when we get the opportunity to. And that in the aggregate plus, LeBron and AD in crunch time being the best two players on the floor against most teams is going to be enough for us to win games, win series, and eventually win a championship. It worked once. They decided for some reason to say, let's go completely away from that. They unwind that mistake at the trade deadline this year to build a team that looks a lot like the one that won the title. And they've been pretty much awesome since. So maybe it's less, I understand our reticence to go all in on Anthony Davis as, the top 5 player that he knows he can be, as Darvin Ham said after game 1. But when he's ambulatory, when he's actually able to stay upright, this is what has worked for them. It's who they've been. And at this point, it's going to take something special from Golden State to be able to kind of dissuade you from the position that this is maybe what the Lakers can be. It's Goliath being able to just impose his will, but also take away your slingshot. And that's kind of the tough thing that they were able to do in game 1. I don't know that you're going to get 18 threes combined from Steph, Clay, and Poole again in game 2. Maybe you do, but to get that and lose, I think has to make you a little bit nervous if you're a Warriors fan today.
Yeah. We're recording this before game 2 tonight, like you just said. So I think there's a lot left to be said and to be reviewed and reacted upon after that matchup unfolds. For now, I want to ask you a far more pressing question, because Patrick Beverley, a known favorite of this program,
that's
on
true.
No Cap Room, one who revealed previously on his podcast that he does not have relations with his wife on the evenings before games, says after also both he and Russell Westbrook kind of threw some shade. I don't have the quotes in front of me, but they both kind of alluded to similar sentiments of, well, my new team, the Clippers and Russell Westbrook's circumstance, the Chicago Bulls, my Bulls, and Patrick Beverley's circumstance, utilize these guys to the best of their abilities. They had them swinging their authentic swings, as opposed to the Lakers trying to make them fit out as opposed to fit in. Now, these two veterans who have been around the block, who have made plenty a postseason wave without achieving a championship, they both apparently, according to Patrick Beverley, after seeing Russell Westbrook in a gym, they both apparently want a championship ring if the Lakers, that I am doubting their championship ability still, are able to hoist that Larry O'Brien come June, whatever. They want their rings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a questionable take to me. Would you want a ring if you were one of those two guys?
Well, so just for the purposes of context here, or at least as much context as I can provide, having not listened to the full episode of the Pat Bev podcast, which, with all due respect to all those involved in it, I'm probably not gonna.
I will say this. I listened to the full episode when he made the no sex before games comment, because I wanted to make sure before we talked about it on our program that it was accurate. That's the type of reporting that I bring to you and our listeners. Yeah,
you're a serious reporter, and I'm just some schmuck over here not doing the work. But here's what we have from the quote that I've got here, as transcribed by basketballnetwork.net, the always reputable basketballnetwork.net. Russ goes, this is Pat Bev talking. Russ goes, "Hey, Pat, if the Lakers win, I want my ring. I ain't going to lie, Russ. We're going to be suited and booted, and I'll be right there waiting for my ring." This is Patrick Beverley. My take on this is, I think we maybe would be we've been trained to expect the other way, right? If I wasn't there on the court or in the practices all the way through, then I didn't earn it, I don't deserve it, and I'm not going to take it. And the example that I have from this was back in 2016, Anderson Varejao, longtime member of the Cavaliers, actually got traded to the Warriors that season. Those two teams wind up meeting in the finals. And there was the question of, like, if the Cavs win, is he going to take the ring? And the reporting, no. He wouldn't accept a ring that he was not there to win. And I mean, honor and nobility is wonderful, but if you don't have a championship ring, it sure seems like it'd be pretty freaking cool to get one. They're like the size of your head, and they're encrusted in diamonds and jewels. And also, like, the teams that win the championship give out like hundreds of rings to everybody.
Oh yeah.
I think there was something where there was one team, I forget which one, had given out like literally maybe the Heat during the Big Three era, had given out literally like 400 or 500 rings. So if Patrick Beverley spent half the season there, if Russell Westbrook spent half the season there, and not for nothing, if trading those guys away got you the rotation that provides you with the championship, like not for nothing. And yes, moving on from me, like a space shuttle that loses its jets as it reaches orbit. Like I got you up there, and then I fell aside, and then you went into the stratosphere. That's got to be worth something, and I imagine it'll be worth like a $3 or $4 million gold and diamond ring.
This is like The Good Luck Chuck is that movie where Dane Cook is the guy who women date and then they meet the one. Like that's kind of there's a celebration of being someone who maybe needed to get over and learn from your past, learn from your experiences in order to finally get over the hump and reach that promised land. Although I mean
it's good. It's good luck, Russ.
Good luck, Russ. Good luck, Pat Bev. Maybe so. I think, I don't know. I see your point on wanting the ring. I just call bull. Bleep me, John Gennaro. I don't give a damn. Bull. Especially because they just like trounced the Lakers verbally and kind of gave them the middle finger on the way out. They gave them the Jimmy Butler to the MSG crowd. You guys didn't deserve me. How about that? Now you want the ring? I don't know. I don't know.
Listen, when you work for an employer and then it's your task as a member of the workforce, as a laborer, to get whatever you can out of that employer, to use your benefits, take advantage of whatever opportunities are available to you to transfer the money from the giant corporation to you. That's the job.
Does that apply to multi-millionaires? I don't know.
Listen, they're part of a union too. Workers of the world unite.
They are
Figure
part
out
of
how
the
you
union.
Figure out how you can extract the wealth from the corporation and bring it into your house. And I think doing that in the form of a giant diamond ring sounds pretty freaking cool.
They are part of a union that is very keen on supporting veteran players such as them as opposed to rookies. So there you go. All right, let's go to the other series in the Western Conference where the Denver Nuggets are making the Phoenix Suns look like very little competition for the Western Conference crown. And Chris Paul's now hurt, a groin strain that will likely keep him out for both these home games in Phoenix and who knows how far beyond, which I kind of want to start there because I think largely the public and also many a rival team staffer owes the Denver Nuggets an apology, but I don't think we said it here. I believe we said it on a test show when the Suns go out and trade for Kevin Durant at 34 years old while still recovering from an MCL sprain after, he's made his recovery from his Achilles, phenomenal return, all that, deserves its respect. But when Chris Paul is getting up there in age and hasn't been able, if we talked about Joel Embiid's history of postseason maladies, Chris Paul's right up there, and he's nearly a decade older. So I think this right here, this moment is exposing kind of the flaws of that trade. And don't get me wrong, like if you have a championship contender that was just in the finals and 2 games away from claiming that trophy and you have a chance to go trade for Kevin Durant, you kind of have to go do it. But it was almost reckless to me at the time. I said that then, how much they spent to go do it and how little was left behind. That's not to besmirch the rest of Phoenix's supporting cast, because I have an interview with Josh Okogie that I've been trying to write there, but he just hasn't performed. Come on, Josh Okogie. I'm rooting for you, my guy.
We're rooting for the content above all else.
We had a great 15-minute conversation about how he turned himself into the 5th starter on his super team, and then he was out of the starting lineup, and now he's back in the starting lineup, but he's not even putting up any stats. It's really challenging, man. But I don't know. I say this to say I am very worried about the Suns. I'm worried about how quickly this could really devolve, and Denver could just be sitting up with their feet on the dashboard, waiting for the Lakers and Golden State to slug it out. And there's been a lot of speculation around the league about, new owner Matt Ishbia and what other changes could be coming after they just literally bought the team one day, the next day he pillaged their entire war chest for Kevin Durant, like we just talked about. What else could happen? What other reactions could occur when after you do that? Like, let's say they get swept. Let's say they lose in 5 games. Both are very on the table right now. It's a really interesting circumstance, I think, for the team in the Valley.
Yeah, I mean, and I respect your point of view on not looking to besmirch the remainder of the roster. It's also worth noting that everybody who's not named Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Ayton, and Chris Paul has combined for 32 points in 2 games. So now, and on more shots than that, campaigns 3 of 10, Damian Lee's 1 of 9, Torrey Craig's 1 of 5. Like, there's a lot of guys who are not making the shots that they get. And now maybe part of that is that they're not getting a whole lot of shots in rhythm or opportunities to attack where they need to, all that kind of stuff. So, but clearly more will be needed, especially now with Chris Paul being out. It was not exactly a rocket science take, so I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard so that I sprained something. But when we had to do winners and losers at the trade deadline, after the winning, identifying the Suns as a winner for getting the best player to change hands, the next thing I wrote was the most important people in the NBA right now are the Suns training staff, because you're now a couple of false steps away from relying more on Campaign and Landry Shamet than you would like to in the second or third round of the playoffs. And here we are. It's a bummer because Chris Paul had kind of started to get it going in that game too. He had it was, I think it was like a +8 when he went out of the lineup. He had gotten a couple of jumpers to go. It felt like there was something kind of brewing there. And now you were essentially broadly viewed as a 4-man team that's down to 3. And there's just not a whole lot of alternative options there. But this is, as you said, it's sort of the deal with the devil you make when you go all in with that sort of like 4 quarters for $1 trade. And I think it's doom and gloom because the Nuggets have looked as good in game 1 as basically any team has in the entire postseason. And then even when they didn't have their fastball offensively in game 2, they defended better than I think anybody expects the Nuggets to be able to defend. And so you saw them win at their, with their A game, and then you saw them win when they were playing like with a hand tied behind their back. And so that leaves you wondering, where do the Suns get it from? Some of that, Kevin Durant can't shoot 3 for 15 from 3. And I don't think you'd expect him to continue that. Aaron Gordon deserves a lot of credit for the way he's been playing him one-on-one defensively. The help defense has been great, but at a certain point,
blocking the fadeaway.
Yeah, and I kind of like in that moment, I'm forgetting like, oh, right. He probably did a lot of this in practice the last couple of years, right? Like, last year where he actually spent that time on KD in Brooklyn. But some of it is, Monty Williams maybe is going to be forced now by injury and ineffectiveness to say like, let's find out if Terrence Ross can a few jumpers for us. If TJ Warren can give you some offense off the dribble, maybe tilting a little bit more toward offensive players than some of the more defensive minded ones he feels more comfortable with. It's not, you would not expect that to change a series dramatically, but they got to try something to get the offense uncorked. And some of it too could be like just the way that they're choosing to attack. My guy David, he's the 4-point play on Twitter for like a Roman numeral IV. The 4-point play on Twitter is a great Suns follow. And he was talking about the moving east-west as opposed to north-south. Because if you're going north-south with a lot of your actions, it's all Denver can load up on that. And you don't have to, that doesn't necessarily put quite as much strain on Jokic defensively. If you go east-west and you're looking to string things out towards the sideline, it makes the defense shift one way, and then you can kind of get the ball back to the weak side, maybe be able to attack a scrambled defense. And they had a lot more success with that. So some of it might just be you've got to try to put pressure on the Nuggets defense in ways that they're not prepared for. And it's a little going to be tougher to do that shorthanded without Chris Paul, but every stone needs to get turned over now. You got to find offense wherever you can, because that's always been the path for the Suns here. It was you get in Kevin Durant to have the most overwhelming offense you can. If you're not overwhelming the Nuggets with offense, then you're not going to win, because they're going to overwhelm your defense more often than not. So we'll see what kind of counters they're able to come back with game 3 with no Chris Paul. But I think a lot of it, sometimes the best adjustment is you guys have to just play better. And Devin Booker's been equal to the task. Kevin Durant's got to play like Kevin Durant, and they've got to find more ways to get other guys involved.
So I watched game 2 on Monday night from Secaucus, New Jersey.
That's right.
And so I saw a lot of like the crazy ending in the fourth quarter with Philly Boston, where PJ Tucker kind of waxed Jason Tatum in a sensitive region.
He didn't kind of whack him. It was like a spinning reverse back fist that you might see on like AEW or Ring of Honor or something like that. It was wild. Shout out to Eddie Kingston.
And the whole Tyrese Maxey block charge of Marcus Smart and his sixth foul. And then I really wanted to see a coach's challenge. We got that early in Denver, Phoenix. I did not include that in the story, but when KD reached on someone, I forget, and it was a foul, and it was his fourth foul, and it was unsuccessful. So this story and my trip there happened like way quicker than I imagined. I literally just texted the league PR and I was like, hey, I want to go hang out with Monty McCutcheon. This guy looks like a ringleader of a circus while coming on national TV as like this baron of adjudication of the holy rules that govern our sport. Like, what a concept, what a contrast of ideals. And
I mean, did you think he was gonna like you would show up there and he would have like Naismith's rules of basketball on tablets in his arm? Like, what did you think you were gonna be walking into?
I thought maybe he'd be like feeding an elephant. There'd be like a staff like out of Noah's Ark or something. I don't know. I mean, I will say, like, I went into that building and was told I had marching orders. It was my idea to go, but I had marching orders from up top to not write just a pure propaganda piece in favor of the league and their tip-top officiating operation that got going on there. It was hard to leave not being like, wow, the refs did such a good job. I'm not going to lie. Like, I mean, they're in this bunker. Picture like a ring of desks around this room where there's 14 desks that all have like 3 external monitors, with one monitor that has 12 angles going at all times. You can click one and blow it up. There's this machine that kind of looks like something between a supersized calculator and a rotary phone that has this black trackpad thing that you can like spin in a circle to rewind and fast forward like that.
Okay.
And like the second there's a controversial, any call, the number one thing I was struck by, so there's a ref in the Monty McCutcheon's there, the senior executive. Sometimes it's Kane Fitzgerald. There's also like another executive named Pete Williams who's there pretty much every night. But they're watching a different game than us. They are truly fans rooting for the refs to get every call accurate. And when there's a good no call, they're like clapping. Good job, man. And when there's like, a review or something like that, I mean, I'm telling you, man, they're already rewinding and zooming in and looking at angles. They've looked at it 7 or 8 times before the game official on the floor is even making it to the scores table to put on his headset. When they put on a headset, they're talking to the ref that is positioned in the replay center. One thing I learned, though, that was before we get to Monty McCutcheon, that was pretty crazy. The overwhelming majority, and you see it, I think, on TV broadcast, but it didn't really click in my head until someone there said it. The overwhelming majority of these replays that are necessary to take extra time to review, they're decided by an angle from the RoboCam on top of the backboard, where obviously no official is standing. It'd be kind of crazy if someone was just kind of sitting on the backboard all
perched
game
up
long.
there like a gargoyle or Spider-Man or something. No, that would be terrifying. Imagine trying to take a jumper with that dude up there.
Yeah, I kind of want to see it, honestly. It'd be like a carnival game. Maybe he'd even like act as like a like someone sitting on like a dunk tank thing.
Draymond would definitely try to hit that guy, knock him off the top of the backboard.
But he's not flexible enough to kick up there. Just that's what he said. So one thing I learned, though, is not every arena has that RoboCam, and it's definitely a thing where, all season long, fans have been pointing out, media have been pointing out that the Lakers have been getting like a very favorable, unbalanced amount of whistles.
Shouts out to our guy Ben Rohrbach, who went through the data on the incorrect no calls, correct no calls, whatever. See who got the friendliest shake and found the Lakers up at the top of that list earlier this season.
So look, if fans out there want to say that there's like a big market, agenda, I'll say this: not every arena, a lot of the smaller markets don't have that RoboCam. They have a disadvantage at getting the calls accurate. because if you don't have that angle, then this crack
can't
team
review it.
Can't review it. And some arenas only have it on one basket. So on one side of the floor, you get all this access, you get all this, optionality of figuring out what the correct call is, and the other basket you don't. So that was one of the most interesting takeaways to me, that this like crucial element to what they're doing there doesn't exist in some of these. I'm not going to say they brought me into the trust nest. It was a safe space. There's a lot that I learned that I was asked not to share with the public. I've shared a lot. I've written a lot. I think I didn't pull any punches, but yeah, that was just really interesting to me when, conspiracies abound about the league favoring this and that. Like everyone there, they were laughing it off. Like, oh, makeup calls. You can't make up a wrong with another wrong, and never once has the league ushered some type of. This is what they were saying.
I don't believe. I mean, I believe broadly the canard of two wrongs don't make a right. But if you're telling me that makeup calls don't happen, I do not believe that for a second.
I believe makeup calls happen.
Of course.
Happen. But that being said, like there is some type of credence to the fact that a smaller market team might not be getting the same benefits of bigger market teams, being that their arenas just haven't paid for that camera to be on that backboard. It's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, and there's broader applications to that, right? Where it's like, is this a conspiracy theory or is it a structural or institutional gap in resources and technology?
It's
and
that.
Yeah, and so, but it apply. I mean, that can be true in a lot of other walks of life too. So yeah, I mean, part of that is like, get your owner to pay for the cameras, but also like, I mean, like, because we had that same or a similar conversation a decade or more ago when it was like the sport view cameras, right? Like the optical tracking data. And it was like, well, only a handful of teams have that. So are they getting an unfair advantage by getting information that nobody else has access to? And the flip side of that was like, how good is the information that they're getting if you have only a smaller sample because it's not in every arena, all that kind of stuff. And then it winds up being like everybody just pays for it, and eventually they're everywhere, so that it is a level playing field. You wonder if that's sort of the version of this that winds up manifesting as you go along.
One can only hope. I'll give you. We'll say one more thing, and then we'll get out of here, because I see in our rundown a takeaway that you had from my story, which was also my takeaway. But I'm always curious as a writer, what things in the copy resonate with the audience. If you did, because that's really a measure of if you did your job well enough. You go, you see, you write what you see, but did the people who weren't there see what you wrote? So, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I read your story about going to the replay center, and the main thing that I took away was not so much about structural imbalances and officiating technology or anything like that. It was, is Monty McCutcheon the most interesting guy in the entire NBA? Because this dude's making his own suits out here. He's making his own bow ties. He's harboring hopes of going off to make goat cheese on farms. He's quoting poems and short stories about rivers and eddies. Like, there's a lot happening with Monty McCutcheon. You're there for like a night, and you can't. The takeaway here is like, this guy is or if nothing else, he seems to contain multitudes. So I'm wondering what your view of him was when you went in, what sort of preconceived notions you had of him when you got on the train to go out to Jersey, and then how what you actually experienced lined up with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's an absolute legend, and I want to hang out with him all the time. Like, I wanted to go behind the curtain and see what was happening in Oz. I wanted to see what the replay center is all about. And now, like, even the other night when we came back and I was watching games on TV, I was pointing out to the people in my living room that, like, oh, the ref there, he's putting on the headphones like he's talking to, like, after I was, like, I know how it works now. But also, I really wanted to meet and hang out with this guy who dresses as he does on national television, because there's something there. You're waking up and not choosing violence, but choosing something. You're choosing. I mean, there's a conscious effort to go into that outfit, and I wanted to get it and then get it out of the story. So I didn't go into full background, but he was telling me how a lot of his style choices have come from as a child moving around in Texas a lot, didn't have a lot of money. He only got $150 for new clothes every school year. And he learned the value of mixing and matching, take a piece from this outfit, take a piece from that outfit. All of a sudden, you've got 3 outfits, that type of stuff.
Right.
And it was just, he practices trumpet. Like, the guy just has traveled and learned and thought and cared and reflected and had conversations with who knows who and where and why and how, and contemplated all of it. And he's just so down to hang and chat and talk about life. I mean, he definitely has to be the most interesting person I've met in the NBA. He has to be. And I think it comes down to this. Like, he clearly gave me this impression of someone who is willing and able to learn anything. Like, anything in life is something that you can look at and say, I want to figure out how to do that. And I'm going to ask the right questions to do it. I'm going to learn. What a great mindset. What a great
it's a wonderful mindset
to take into this world.
It's also a fascinating thing because, we've talked about this before, I think on the show and also privately, that sense of like when you're doing something professionally, it can kind of winnow down. It sort of streamlines your life to a certain extent. Like, you wind up just digging so much into the thing that you do for your job. And then like hobbies can go by the wayside, or opportunities to sort of learn other things. You don't have as much time for them and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to speak ill of any other basketball people, but I think, you talk when you hear about like lifers, right? Coaches who are in the league forever. It's like, this is the thing they obsess over and the only thing they do. And then everything else outside of it is kind of like whatever. There was a moment the other night where Tom Thibodeau, in the course of praising Josh Hart, was like, he's just a basketball player. And I think that's the best thing you can say about anyone. And you kind of got the feeling that that's like Tom Thibodeau thinks that broadly, like the best thing you could say about anyone is he's just a basketball player. And that could be true if you were like a UN ambassador or a head of state or something else. And to see somebody who also like is a lifer and has devoted his entire professional career to this thing, but then it's also like, then this is one lens to view the world through. And then there's this whole other thing. And I'm going to do all this other stuff too. I thought that was kind of heartening and cool and
pretty rad.
In a way that runs counter to, I think, what you'd anticipate somebody whose whole life has been basketball would wind up, the way that they would wind up viewing the world. So if Monty McCutcheon affords us the opportunity to remind ourselves that there's more life outside those 4 lines, it's a far better thing that he does, and that you, Jake Fisher, do by bringing that story out to the masses.
There you go. We'll leave it there, because what better note to send people on a closing segment about basketball with a show in their ears out into the rest of their lives. And that'll be that. We'll be back next Thursday. As always, not as always, we've changed up a little bit, but typically, as always.
Mostly on Thursdays.
As mostly on Thursdays. Vinny Goodwill will be back on Monday with another episode of Good Word with Goodwill. Thanks to John Gennaro for doing all the things he does to make this show look and sound great. Follow us on Twitter to see video snippets of the podcast if you don't feel like finding the full show on YouTube.
Find the full show on YouTube also. Find the full show on YouTube also.
I am at Jake L. Fisher. That's at Your Man Divine, who tweets far more often than I do. If you've made it this far, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening and leave us a 5-star review. That'd be great. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. We would appreciate it if you came back on another edition of No Cap Room on the Ball Don't Lie podcast network.